Welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're wrestling with a ghost.
Hmm.
And I don't mean that in, a spooky haunted house kind of way.
Right.
I mean a ghost that is so massive, so pervasive that it haunts our architecture, our language, our laws, even the way we think about what power actually looks like. We are talking about the Roman Empire.
It really is the ghost in the machine of the Western world, isn't it?
Yeah.
You really can't walk down a street in London, Paris, or heck, even Washington, D.C. without seeing its fingerprints.
Exactly. But here's the problem, and I think you'll agree with me on this one. When most of us learn about Rome, usually in school, it's abstract.
Very.
It's a map. It's that massive splash of red or pink paint covering the Mediterranean.
Yeah, the blob.
The blob, and it's a list of dates and battles and emperors that all start to sound the same after a while. Feels inevitable and honestly a little dry.
That's the trap. It becomes a game of risk. You just look at the borders expanding and contracting, and you completely forget that there were actual people inside those borders.
Yes.
You forget the noise, the smell, the tactile reality of living inside that red splash of paint.
Which is precisely why I'm so excited about the source material we're working with today. We are using the Ancient Rome Guide from DK Eyewitness, and if you know these books, you know they aren't about long, dense paragraphs of text.
No, not at all. They're about objects.
The stuff.
It's history through the lens of a crime scene investigator or maybe an archaeologist. We're not looking at the grand decrees of the Senate. We're looking at the debris.
The physical debris.
Rusty iron swords, smashed pottery, bent coins, weird-looking grooming tools, the leftovers of a civilization.
So our mission for today is to reconstruct the Roman world from the bottom up. We want to take these objects and use them to figure out what it felt like to be there.
To get inside their heads.
What did it feel like to wear the boots? What did it feel like to hold the sword? What did they eat for dinner? And this is a real question we need to answer today. How did they clean their ears?
We are going to deconstruct the machine. We're going to look at the nuts and bolts of the empire.
But before we get to the ear picks and the swords, we have to set the scene, because Rome implies this monolithic, eternal thing, but it started as nothing, really.
It started as a swampy village, a collection of huts on some hills.
The legend says 753 BCE. That's the date they always give you. And the story is Romulus and Remus.
Right. The twin sons of Mars, the god of war. It's the ultimate foundational myth, isn't it? You have these two infants, abandoned, suckled by a she-wolf, surviving against all the odds.
It's an incredible story. They decide to build a city on 7 hills near the Tiber River.
But the core of that story isn't just about survival. It's about violence.
It is. Romulus kills Remus. Fratricide. Right at the very beginning.
The city is literally baptized in the blood of her brother. And that sets a very, very specific tone for everything that comes after. It says, we value power and the state above everything else, even family.
And that ruthlessness is just baked into the DNA of Rome. They eventually ditch their kings. They kick out this guy, Tarquin the Proud, in 509 BCE and declare a republic, a res publica.
A public affair. The people's business.
But they didn't do this in a vacuum. And this is our first major stop on the roadmap today, the neighbors. Because I think we have this idea that Rome was the civilizer of the ancient world.
The bringer of light.
Yeah, exactly. But early on, they were basically the backwater, weren't they?
Oh, completely. They were the rough kids on the block. They were the upstarts. To the north, you had the Etruscans. To the south, you had the Greeks and their colonies. And Rome was just this little town sitting in the middle watching and learning.
And eventually
stealing. Absolutely.
So let's dig into the Etruscans first.
Oh.
I feel like they're the forgotten step-parents of Western civilization. People know the Greeks, people know the Romans, but the Etruscans kind of get skipped over.
They're incredibly important. They occupied what we now call Tuscany. And while Rome was still, a bunch of mud huts, the Etruscans were building these complex cities, draining swamps, trading iron all over the Mediterranean. They were master engineers.
And the early Roman kings, they were Etruscan, right?
It were. The Tarquins, for example, were an Etruscan dynasty. So when the Romans kicked out the kings in 509 BCE, they were really kicking out foreign rulers.
So they kick out the rulers, but they kept the good stuff.
They kept the technology, they kept the rituals, the robes, the symbols of power, and a whole lot more. The source material highlights one specific artifact that gives us this chilling insight into what else they kept. It's a leg. A leg from a toilet box.
Okay, we need to define toilet box here, because in modern English, that sounds plumbing related.
Right. No, not that kind of toilet. Think toilet. as in a grooming case, a container for makeup, mirrors, combs, oils. This would have belonged to a very wealthy Etruscan woman.
So it's a domestic object, something you'd see every morning while getting ready for the day.
Yeah. Exactly, a luxury item. But the decoration on it is not exactly domestic bliss.
What's on it?
It's a relief carving, and it shows a 3-horse chariot, a triga, that is just smashing into a man. He's fallen under the hooves and wheels. It's a scene of violent, spectacular death, carved right there on the leg of the makeup box.
Wow, that seems distinct. I don't have, car crashes painted on my bathroom mirror. Why would you want that kind of imagery in your bedroom?
Well, it tells us that violence and adrenaline were just baked into the culture. The Etruscans were obsessed with chariot racing. They loved the spectacle of death. Some scholars even think gladiatorial combat started with them as part of their funeral rites.
So that artifact is like the smoking gun. It suggests Rome didn't invent the gladiator games or the circus.
They inherited that bloodlust. They inherited that appetite for violent spectacle directly from the Etruscans.
So the engineering capacity to build the sewers and the aqueducts comes from the north.
Yep.
But so does the cultural appetite for watching people die for sport.
Exactly. Rome took the hardware and the software of violence from the Etruscans, but then they looked south to the Greeks. And this is a different kind of theft. This is more a intellectual and aesthetic theft.
And the source has a few objects that show this transition. There's a river god clay face, which shows their skill with pottery.
Right, very expressive.
And then there's a silver plaque of Aphrodite.
The Aphrodite plaque is key. It's this beautiful piece of silver hammered into relief. And Aphrodite is, of course, the Greek goddess of love.
And the Romans take her.
They take her, they rename her Venus, and then they claim her as the mother of the entire Roman people through her son Aeneas. It's the ultimate rebrand.
It's copy-paste rename.
Essentially. But it's not just about the gods. Look at the shoulder guard from the suit of armor that's mentioned in the source.
Okay, what's on that?
It depicts a Greek warrior fighting an Amazon, the Amazons being the legendary female warriors, of course.
Yeah.
But look at the craftsmanship. The muscles are anatomically correct. The drapery of the tunic follows the laws of physics. It's realistic. It looks like a still from a movie. This is what the Romans admired. They didn't want their art to look abstract or stylized like some other cultures. They wanted it to look like the Greek masters made it.
It's almost like an inferiority complex. We have the swords, but they have the soul.
That's a very valid way to look at it.
Yeah.
There's that famous saying by the poet Horace, captive Greece took captive her rude conqueror. Rome conquered trees militarily, but Greece conquered Rome culturally.
So Rome is this synthesis. They take the engineering and the aggression of the Etruscans, they mix it with the art and the gods of the Greeks, and then they just scale it up.
Massively.
And the mechanism for that scaling, the tool that actually allowed them to conquer the world, is what we need to talk about next.
The war machine.
This is segment 2, the legionary. And honestly, looking at the breakdown of the equipment in the source material, it is exhausting just to read about it.
It is.
I think we need to dispel the movie myth where soldiers just, grab a sword and a shield and run out the door screaming.
Oh, absolutely. It was a profession. That
Yeah.
is the critical distinction. These weren't peasant levies called up for a summer campaign and then sent home to harvest wheat. These were professionals. They signed a contract.
And the contract was for a long, long time.
20 to 25 years.
Let's just pause on that for a second. 25 years. In the ancient world, where life expectancy wasn't exactly high to begin with, that's essentially signing away your entire adult life.
It is. You join at 18 or 20. If you survive, and that is a very big if, you get out at 45, you're an old man by the standards of the day.
But the deal is good. I mean, it had to be, right?
The deal was good. You got regular pay, you got food, you got medical care, which was actually, believe it or not, better in the Army than for most civilians.
And you got a pension.
The pension was the prize. It was usually a plot of land, often in a newly conquered territory. It was a ticket to the middle class, a way to secure a future for your family. But in exchange, you became a machine. You became one of Marius's mules.
Okay, so who is Marius, and why did he turn his men into pack animals?
B.S. Marius was a general who reformed the army around 107 BCE. And he realized that baggage trains, the massive lines of wagons and carts carrying tents, food, and equipment, were a huge liability.
How so?
They were slow. They got stuck in the mud. They could be ambushed. They dictated the army's pace. So Marius had a radical idea. Eliminate them.
He just got rid of the wagons. Where did all this stuff go?
He made the soldiers carry everything themselves. on their backs.
Define everything, because looking at this list in the source, it just seems impossible.
It's not just your armor and weapon. Okay, so you have your shield, your helmet, your sword, your javelins, but then you add a saw,
A saw.
a wicker basket for moving earth, a pickaxe, a leather thong for binding wood, a cooking pot, a pan, 3 days of grain rations, and your personal items.
Wait, why a saw and a pickaxe? They're soldiers, not carpenters.
Because they didn't just fight, they built.
Yeah.
Every single night, no matter how tired they were, no matter where they were, a Roman legion would build a fortified camp.
Every night.
Every single night. They would dig a ditch, build a rampart out of the earth, and then erect a wooden palisade on top. They slept behind walls every single night, even on campaign, and that requires tools.
So you march all day, and then you have to do construction work. That's insane. What is the total weight we are talking about here?
Estimates vary, but the source suggests around 90 pounds. That's 40 kilograms.
90 pounds. Imagine strapping 90 pounds to your back. That's like carrying a middle schooler. And then walking. How far are we talking?
The standard march was 20 Roman miles in 5 hours. That's about 30 kilometers, or 18 of our miles.
In 5 hours. With that weight.
It's a blistering pace. And that's just the commute. Then you dig the ditch, then you grind your grain and cook it. Then you stand watch.
It creates a level of physical conditioning that is hard for us to even grasp. They must have been incredibly tough.
It turned them into athletes. But more importantly, it made them strategically mobile. A Roman army could appear 50 miles away in 2 days, fully fortified. Enemies couldn't track them. They moved faster and more unpredictably than any army that relied on wagons.
Okay, let's look at the gear itself, the technology that kept them alive. Because the Romans were, they were engineers of death.
They were.
The helmet stands out to me. The source identifies it as being of Gallic origin.
Again, borrowing what works.
Mm-hmm.
If the enemy has a better helmet, you don't stick to tradition, you copy it. The Imperial Gallic helmet is a marvel of design.
In what way?
It has a flared neck guard in the back. This is crucial because in a chaotic melee, the most common blow is a downward hacking swing from above. The neck guard deflects that. It has hinged cheek pieces to protect the face. But look at the cutouts for the eyes and ears.
They're quite large.
Deliberately so. A soldier needs peripheral vision. But more importantly, he needs to hear. The Roman army ran on voice commands and trumpet signals. If you block the ears with thick metal, you break the command and control system. A deaf soldier is a useless soldier, and a dead one.
It's function over form.
Pure function.
Then there's the famous body armor, the lorica segmentata, the lobster shell.
It was a masterpiece of industrial design, really.
Mm-hmm.
Previous armor was often chainmail, which is heavy, and all the weight hangs on your shoulders. Or it was a solid breastplate, which is stiff and restricts your movement.
And this was different.
Completely. It was overlapping iron strips held together by leather straps on the inside. It moved with the body. You could swing a sword, you could bend over, you could crouch. It was flexible.
But the source notes a catch with this armor, a very interesting detail.
Yes. You can't put it on by yourself.
Worry.
No. It laces up the front and the back in sections. You physically need a comrade, one of your tent mates, to dress you for battle.
I just love that detail. It enforces unit cohesion. It's a built-in buddy system. You literally cannot prepare for battle without your friend. It forces you to trust the guy next to you before you even step onto the field.
It makes them a single organism. 8 men in a tent, they live together, they eat together, they dress each other for war.
Now we have to talk about the belt, the cingulum. This isn't just to hold up their tunic.
Oh no, the belt was the badge of rank. It was the symbol of being a soldier. Even if a legionary was in the bathhouse or the market without his armor, he wore the belt. It told everyone, I am a soldier of Rome.
And it had those decorative strips hanging down the front?
Yes, the bolteus. Leather strips studded with metal discs. They offered a little bit of protection to the groin, but their main purpose was something else.
And the source mentions a sound design aspect to this.
The jangling. The studs in the metal plates would clash and clatter against each other as they marched. Now imagine 5,000 men marching in perfect step.
The noise must have been incredible.
Crash, crash, crash. It wasn't just a march, it was an industrial rhythm. It was this terrifying metallic sound that announced their arrival long before you even saw them.
Psychological warfare through fashion.
Yeah.
Amazing. And speaking of sound, the boots, the caligae.
These are iconic, and they aren't flimsy sandals, like you see in movies sometimes.
Not at all.
They are heavy-duty military boots. The source highlights the soles. They're absolutely covered in iron hobnails. They look like modern golf cleats or football boots.
Why iron? Why not just have thick leather soles?
Two reasons. First, traction. If you're in a shield wall pushing against an enemy line in the mud, you cannot slip. If you slip, the formation breaks and you die. The hobnails dug into the earth and gave them a solid footing.
And the second reason?
Durability. They were marching on stone roads for thousands of miles. Leather wears out quickly. The iron hobnails made the boots last. And of course, they also made a hell of a noise. The thunder of 10,000 hobnailed boots on a stone road.
You'd feel it in your bones.
You would.
So we have the noise of the boots and the jangle of the belts. Now let's talk about the killing tools. The pilum, the javelin.
This is one of the smartest, most devious weapons ever designed. A Roman soldier carried two of them. They would throw them just before charging, from about 15 or 20 yards away. But the design had a hidden feature.
What was that?
The long metal shank was made of soft, unhardened iron, while the very tip, the point, was hardened steel.
Why soft iron? That sounds like a defect. You'd want a weapon to be strong all the way through.
You would think so, but it was a feature, not a bug. When the pilum hit an enemy's shield, the hardened point would punch right through the wood. But because the shank behind it was soft, the weight of the heavy wooden shaft would cause the metal to bend on impact.
So it droops.
It droops. And this does two absolutely brilliant things. One, the enemy cannot pull it out and throw it back at you. The weapon is ruined. And two, and this is the genius part, if you have a 6-foot heavy pole dragging on the ground attached to your shield, you can't use the shield anymore. It's too heavy and awkward. You have to drop it.
So the very first volley strips the enemy of their primary defense.
Exactly. It turns an armored, shielded enemy into an unarmored, defenseless one in the space of about 3 seconds. And then the Romans draw the gladius.
The short sword. And it is surprisingly short when you see it.
It looks like a large knife compared to the long slashing swords of the Celts or the Germans. But that was the point. The Romans fought in a tight formation, shield to shield, like a phalanx.
The tortoise.
Well, the tortoise, the testudo, was a specific defensive formation. But in general, they fought very close together. There's no room to swing a long sword in that kind of crush. You'd just hit your own guys.
So what's the mechanic? How do you kill with it if you can't swing?
You stab. The stab. You tuck behind your large rectangular shield, the scutum. You peek out, and you thrust forward, underarm, into the gut or the groin of the man in front of you. A 2-inch stab wound to the belly is fatal in the ancient world.
Horrifying.
It was efficient, brutal, and it was perfectly designed for their style of warfare. It's a grinder. It's not about individual heroism and swinging swords. It's about the geometry of death.
That is the perfect way to describe it. And if all else fails, they had a backup.
The pugio, the dagger worn on the left hip, the last resort, or more realistically, a utility knife for camp life. You know, cutting rope, cutting your food.
We should also just quickly mention the auxiliaries, because the legions weren't out there alone.
No, absolutely not. The citizen legionaries were the heavy infantry, the core of the army. But they needed support. They needed archers, cavalry, slingers. These were recruited from non-citizens in the provinces. They did the specialist jobs the Romans weren't as good at.
So the machine is complete. But someone has to direct this machine. Someone has to tell the grinder where to go. And that brings us to segment 3, the emperors.
The head of the snake.
The transition from republic to empire is the pivot point of the entire history, and it really revolves around the image of power. We have to start with Julius Caesar.
Who was technically a dictator, not an emperor.
Yeah.
He grabbed power, he ruled alone, and he got stabbed 23 times for acting too much like a king. The senators were very proud of their traditions. They did not want a monarch.
But his adopted son, Augustus, he was smarter about it. He learned from Caesar's mistakes. He cracked the code.
Augustus is the absolute genius of propaganda. He realized that Romans hated the word king, the word rex, so he never ever used it. He called himself princeps, the first citizen.
Just one of the guys.
Exactly. He pretended to restore the republic while quietly keeping all the armies and all the money for himself. It was a military dictatorship veiled in tradition.
And he knew how to brand himself. The source has a cameo, a carved gem that depicts Augustus.
These cameos are fascinating. They were luxury items for the elite, passed around in wealthy circles. And in this one, Augustus is shown in profile. He looks calm, divine, eternally young.
Like a god.
Precisely. He ruled into his 70s, but if you look at his statues and portraits, he never ages past 30. He is frozen in time as this perfect, handsome leader.
It's a filter. It is the original Instagram filter.
It absolutely is.
Mm.
He understood that his image was his power, and he brought his family into it.
Mm.
We see his wife, Livia, depicted with the attributes of the goddess Juno. His daughter, Julia, is shown as the goddess Roma.
He was building a mythology.
He was building a theology around his family. He wasn't just a ruler. He was the head of a new divine household. It solidified their right to rule. If your dad is a god and your mom is a goddess, well, who's going to argue with you?
Right, but cameos are for the rich. How do you convince the guy slogging through the mud in Britain or the guy baking bread in Syria that you are the divine leader?
That's where you use things like the Tiberius sword.
Okay, this artifact is basically a detective story. Walk us through it.
So it was found in the Rhine River in Germany, probably lost by a soldier. It's not the sword itself, but the scabbard, the sheath. And it's incredibly ornate. The central panel shows the Emperor Tiberius, that's Augustus' successor, sitting on a throne, receiving a victory tribute from his nephew, the famous general Germanicus.
It looks like it's made of solid gold and silver.
That's what it wants you to think. But the analysis in the source shows it's actually made of brass and tinned bronze. It's just polished to look like gold and silver.
So it's knockoff bling.
It's mass-produced propaganda. These were likely given out to officers or high-ranking soldiers as rewards or badges of loyalty. It's a constant message. Here is your shiny scabbard. Look at the picture. Remember who gave it to you. Remember who was sitting on the throne.
That is brilliant. It's a constant visual reminder of the hierarchy worn right on your hip.
And for the illiterate masses, for everyone else, there were coins. The source calls them the newspapers of the ancient world, and that's a perfect description.
Because there's no TV, no internet. How do you even know what the emperor looks like?
You look at the change in your pocket. If the emperor conquers a new territory, he mints a coin with his face on one side and Victoria Parthica on the other, victory over the Parthians. If he builds a new aqueduct, he puts the aqueduct on the coin.
So every transaction.
Every time you bought a loaf of bread or a jug of wine, you were consuming a tiny piece of state propaganda.
Now, not all emperors were as calculated and successful as Augustus or Tiberius. We have the bad emperors.
The madness of absolute power. Caligula comes to mind.
Who, the source notes, was murdered after only 4 years.
He alienated the army and the Senate. And in Rome, that's a death sentence. And then, of course, there's Nero.
The fiddler.
The fiddler, yes. The source brings up the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. The accusation at the time was that Nero actually started the fire himself to clear real estate for his golden house, this massive, absurdly luxurious palace complex.
Is that true?
We'll never know for sure, but the fact that people believed it was true shows you how disconnected he was from his people, how much he was hated.
And he eventually commits suicide. It really seems like being emperor was the most dangerous job in Rome.
It absolutely was. The line between glory and a knife in the back was razor thin. But if you survived, if you held on to power, you got to wear the purple.
The color purple. The source makes a really big deal about this. Why was purple so special?
It comes down to chemistry and economics. The dye, Tyrian purple, came from a specific sea snail, the murex snail.
A snail.
A predatory sea snail. To get the dye, you had to crack open the snails and extract a tiny gland. The fluid from the gland was then exposed to sunlight, and it would turn purple.
That sounds like a lot of work.
An incredible amount. You needed thousands, maybe tens of thousands of snails to dye a single cloak, and the process stank. The dye factories apparently smelled like rotting flesh, but the result was this incredible color that didn't fade. In fact, it actually got brighter and more vibrant in the sun.
So it was just insanely expensive.
It was worth more than its weight in gold, and that meant it became the ultimate status symbol. The emperor controlled the supply.
And the laws regarding it were very strict.
Sumptuary laws. If you were a regular citizen and you wore a full purple toga, that was treason. You were impersonating the emperor. You could be executed for a fashion choice. Senators were allowed a purple stripe on their togas, but only the emperor could be draped head to toe in purple.
It's the ultimate branding. I own this color.
It shows you how visual Roman society was. You could look at a man across the forum and know exactly where he stood in the hierarchy by the stripes on his tunic and the shoes on his feet.
Let's pivot away from the high stakes of treason and emperors for a moment. I want to look at the regular people, segment 4, daily life, because the source material here gives us these little glimpses of humanity that I find really, really touching.
This is where the history comes alive. We move from the marble statues to the clay pots.
And some of these pots they're funny.
Whimsy is the perfect word. We tend to think of Romans as these stoic, serious people in white togas. But their housewares tell a completely different story. We have a clay vessel that's shaped exactly like a pig. A little round, spotted pig. And a flask for ointment that's shaped like a hare.
And my absolute favorite is the bronze lamp. It's shaped like a hunting dog, and the dog has a hair in its mouth.
These items tell us that the Romans had a sense of humor. They liked animals. They didn't just want functional gray boxes for everything. They wanted their stuff to be cute, or funny, or interesting.
It humanizes them so much. I feel like if I walked into a Roman house, I'd see things that wouldn't look out of place in a modern novelty shop.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you look at their grooming habits. The source shows a bronze toilet set.
Again, toilet meaning grooming.
Right. A set you'd take to the bathhouse. It's got tweezers. We all know what those are for. But it also have ear picks.
Describe an ear pick.
It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a tiny metal scoop on a long handle. You'd stick it in your ear to scoop out wax.
That is visibly gross, but also, I totally get it. They wanted to be clean.
They were obsessed with cleanliness. The public baths were the center of social life. You went there to get clean, sure, but also to get a massage, do business deals, work out, and gossip.
And the source shows other things, like combs.
Wooden combs, some of them double-sided fine teeth on one side for getting out nets, coarse on the other.
So just like lice combs today.
Exactly. Lice were a reality of life for everyone, from the slave in the mines to the emperor on his throne.
And mirrors? They had mirrors?
Polished bronze, usually. Glass mirrors weren't really common or effective yet, so you would be looking at your reflection in a shiny piece of metal. Your reflection would look a bit golden, a bit distorted, but it was enough to check your makeup or your hair.
And they clearly like to accessorize. We have these gorgeous gold dolphin earrings in the source and silver brooches.
The dolphin earrings are lovely. Again, you see that connection to nature, to the sea. The Romans, especially the wealthy, loved their jewelry.
Okay, what about dinner? We talked about the pig-shaped vessel, but what were they actually eating? The outline mentions a specific delicacy that it stopped me in my tracks.
Ah, yes. First, catch your dormouse.
A dormouse, like a mouse.
Gliss. The edible dormouse. It's larger than a house mouse, more like a small squirrel, really. But this wasn't a pest they caught in the pantry. This was livestock.
They farmed mice.
They did. They had these special terracotta jars called glorarium. These jars had little ledges inside for the mice to run around on and air holes. They would keep them in the dark because they're nocturnal and feed them nuts and acorns to fatten them up.
That's like high-end Wagyu beef, but for mice.
That is the perfect analogy. And then when they were fat enough, they would stuff them, usually with pork mince, spices, pine nuts, roast them, and serve them glazed with honey and poppy seeds.
I don't know if I could do it.
It was the height of luxury. If you were served stuffed dormouse at a dinner party, you knew your host was rich and trying to impress you. We see beautiful silver spoons and ladles in the source, showing that for the wealthy, dinner was an elegant affair, even if the main course was a rodent.
It just goes to show you, cultural tastes change, but some things don't change. The love of entertainment. Which brings us to our final big section, segment 5, blood, sand, and victory.
The arena.
You just can't talk about Rome without talking about the Colosseum. It was the heart of the city's entertainment.
Panem et circenses, bread and circuses. The emperors knew that if they kept the people fed and entertained with these massive bloody spectacles, they wouldn't revolt. The Colosseum was the engine of distraction.
And the gladiators were the rock stars of their day. The source gives us specific details on the different types. We see Rotirius,
The net fighter. This is depicted on a piece of gold glass in the book. It was very unusual. He didn't have a helmet or a shield or any real armor. He just had a loincloth, a net, and a trident.
So he's fighting guys who are basically tanks covered in armor.
Right. He has to use speed and agility and spacing. His whole strategy is to throw the net, entangle his opponent, and then strike with the trident. If he misses with the net or gets cornered, he's dead. It's a high-stakes, high-skill style of fighting that the crowd absolutely loved.
And then you have the more heavily armored ones with the big high-crested helmets and the face masks.
The anonymity of the mask makes it more frightening, I think. It dehumanizes the fighter. He's not a person anymore. He's a killing machine.
But the Colosseum wasn't just for one-on-one sword fights. The source mentions sea battles. This is one of those facts about Rome that just sounds made up.
It sounds completely impossible, but the archaeology backs it up. The early Colosseum, before they built the complex hypogeum, the underground area, could be flooded. They had a complex system of channels and sluice gates that were connected to the city's aqueducts.
So they would just turn the arena into a pool.
Into a lake. And they would put flat-bottom boats in there and stage these incredible miniature naval reenactments. Thousands of men fighting and dying and drowning right there in the middle of the city.
The engineering arrogance of that is just staggering. We can bring the ocean inside.
It was the ultimate demonstration of power. The emperor could command the elements themselves for the amusement of the mob.
And the ultimate goal of all the wars, the legions, the bloody arena was victory.
Victory was literally a goddess, Victoria. The source had a beautiful little bronze statuette of her, a winged figure holding a laurel crown. The Romans worshipped winning. It was the validation of their entire culture. We win, therefore the gods love us, therefore we are right.
And when a general won a really big victory, he got a triumph.
The ultimate parade. The highest honor a Roman could achieve. If you were a general, you conquered a new province, and you killed at least 5,000 enemies, the Senate might grant you a triumph.
So paint the picture for us. What was it like?
It's a massive procession through the streets of Rome. The Senate leads the way. Then you have trumpeters. Then come the carts, piled high with loot, gold, silver, statues, weapons stolen from the enemy. Then come the prisoners, the captured kings and generals, paraded in chains for the crowd to mock.
And finally, the Roman general himself.
Riding in a 4-horse chariot, wearing a purple toga, his face painted red to look like the statue of the god Jupiter. He is a god, just for a day. A slave would stand behind him in the chariot, holding a laurel crown over his head and whispering in his ear, "Remember, you are mortal."
But there's a dark side to the triumph, even beyond the war itself. The source mentions a ritual that happened right at the end.
Yes. While the crowd is cheering and the flower petals are falling, the procession reaches the temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill. The general goes up the steps to make a sacrifice. At that exact moment, the captured enemy leaders, the kings who had just been paraded to the streets, were taken to a nearby dungeon and ritually strangled to death.
So it's this stark contrast, the highest moment of glory and this gruesome private execution happening simultaneously.
It is Rome in a nutshell. High civilization and brutal barbarism existing in the very same moment. They didn't hide the violence. They celebrated it as the necessary cost of empire.
Even their leisure time had this competitive edge. We have a victor gaming counter in the source.
It's just a small token, probably for a board game or gambling, but it shows that even in their games, the concept of victor, the winner, was paramount.
And of course, the other great entertainment, chariot racing.
A day at the races. It was arguably even bigger than the gladiator games. The Circus Maximus could hold way more people than the Colosseum, maybe 250,000 spectators. It was the Formula One of the ancient world. Incredibly dangerous, incredibly fast, and unbelievably popular. The drivers were celebrities who could earn more than senators.
So we've looked at the origins, the soldiers, the emperors, the daily life, and the games. When you step back and look at the whole picture that these objects paint, what do you see?
I see a civilization that was fundamentally a sponge. It was an aggregator. They absorbed the Etruscan engineering and their bloodlust. They absorbed the Greek art and their gods. And then they built this machine, the legion, that could project that combined culture thousands of miles in every direction.
And they projected it so hard and built it so well that we are still staring at their stuff 2,000 years later.
We are. We are still, in some places, literally using their roads. We are still using their alphabet. We're still looking at their statues to understand what power is supposed to look like.
It brings us to the final aha moment for me, the endurance of it all. They really built things to last.
They built for eternity. They called Rome, Roma Eterna, eternal Rome. And in a way, through these objects, through the toilet box, the sword, the coin, the earring, they kind of achieved it. They're still speaking to us.
Here is a question to leave you with, though. We've spent this deep dive analyzing Rome through its physical objects. The coins they used as newspapers, the statues they used as propaganda, the swords they used to enforce it all. If a historian 2,000 years from now digs up our civilization, what are the artifacts that will tell them who our leaders were? What is our version of the Tiberius sword? What is our cameo of Augustus?
That is a very provocative thought.
Yeah.
I mean, will they find a smartphone that won't turn on and wonder if it was a religious icon? Will they find the crumbling remains of a billboard?
Or will they just find nothing but digital ghosts, corrupted files on a dead server? It really makes you appreciate the physicality of Rome. They left a mark in stone and bronze.
They certainly did.
Thanks for taking this journey into the past with us.
It was a pleasure.
Keep digging, keep learning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.